I think my job is a little bit tough. I have to use very smart wordings in a very limited time to introduce such outstanding speakers with tremendous achievements. If you really read Mr. Jimmy Liu's bio, you will be very, very amazed. From sociology, law, investment, wow. I kind of curious how a lawyer becomes so successful investors. He helped a lot of, he has a very strong link with Asia. During time was the general counsel of the Acer group. He handled a lot of JVs, investment, and then merger and acquisition deals. Later on, he co-founded ID Soft Ventures, and then Acer Technology Ventures. Right now, he's the W.I. Harper Managing Director, and he's very active in his alma mater university, it's Yale University, right? And let's welcome Mr. Liu. And can't wait to hear his sharing. And tell us why you didn't catch Meituan Dianping. You said that you were not in the office, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I have to have a good excuse. When Shu Hong went to W.I. Harper, I was not there yet, so. But I was with Acer Ventures when he went to our team, I guess, in Shanghai for investment. So apologize for not accepting the investment at that time. But thank you, Larry, and the rest of the organizers to invite me here to talk about inspiration and those moments in my life where I had to make decisions about career choices and how those moments affected my management style over time, how I was able to deal with people with diverse backgrounds and perspectives, and then addressing various business issues from time to time. And so I'll give you sort of my life story. Larry said, talk about life story, and I will start with the very beginning. So I don't know if many of you know, but I was actually born in Taiwan. I came to the US when I was 5 years old. I grew up in the South, and growing up in the South when schools were still segregated. You had black schools and you had white schools. And so they didn't know exactly where to put Asians, so ended up going to the white schools. But I talk about sort of my career, and I've been in venture for about 20 years now. But my path toward venture was not really a straight, purposeful track to get into venture. I kind of zigzagged along the way, and as my background indicates, I spent a number of years being a lawyer. But then being a lawyer and understanding the skill sets of being a lawyer, it actually got me to be a venture capitalist in a better way, understanding contracts, understanding transactional sort of deals from a legal perspective, and understanding how certain language in contracts can make a big difference if you want to sell a company, portfolio company, or if you want to do a merger and acquisition transaction. But going back to sort of my life story, my parents, when they came with me, and my dad got a job as being an engineering professor at the University of Florida, and he taught there for 30 plus years as a professor of engineering mechanics. And so I really wanted to fit in with American life. I wanted to be an American. Everybody around me actually had blonde hair or fair skin, blue-eyed, and they viewed me as kind of an oddity in the school. So I really felt that I had to do something in my young life at that time to be accepted. So my parents, being Chinese parents, always thought, in order to be accepted, you have to be the best in your class academically. You have to really strive to be the best student. And so I remember this incident when I think I was in the second grade, and my dad, thought that he could teach me algebra when I was in second grade. And so he tried to, after school, try to teach me algebra. But then he realized that my career as an engineer was probably hopeless when when he would say, well, do you understand what I just taught you? And I would just have a blank stare, or I would smile, and he said, okay, find something else to be assimilated to the U.S. society. And so I actually got involved in sports. And so I played a lot of football, baseball, basketball when I was growing up. And I actually got integrated much easier that way. And so I do remember, however, when I got into a sort of competitive level, when I had to go to rural cities, small towns, that's where I really faced sort of racial prejudice for the first time. So you probably heard about Jeremy Lin getting, racial slurs thrown at him, and being sort of the only Asian playing in the NBA. Well, I got a lot of that when I was growing up. And it was kind of hard to take, going to these small cities and dealing with that kind of issue. But I had a very inspirational coach, and who happened to be also an algebra teacher, so that came in handy later, who really told me, don't act negatively. You want to try to compete the best you can, beat them on the field, and play within the rules. And so that really got me through a lot of the hard times. And I look back, and there were some really nasty incidences back then. But one particular kind of amusing sort of incident happened so I was playing baseball, small school, playing against a small school. And I remember stepping up to the plate, and I knew I was going to start getting heckled. And so this dad of an opposing player actually started catcalling, and then he said, well, my goodness, they've got a Chinese girl playing for the boys' baseball team. And so I took part responsibility because when I was growing up, the last 2 years of high school, I started growing my hair really long. I had shoulder-length hair, so he was making fun of me being a Chinese girl. But anyway, so those kind of incidences really kind of built a lot of sort of fortitude in terms of being able to deal with tough situations. And so when I started college, I started to get a little more interested about my own identity, my ethnic identity, and started to study sociology. Where do I fit in the U.S. Society? And then I also took a lot of Chinese classes and actually learned Chinese, because Chinese was my first language, obviously, coming from Taiwan. But I had completely forgotten about how to use the language. I actually refused to speak Chinese when I was growing up because I wanted to fit in so much with my friends in school and outside of school. And I do remember coming back one summer after learning Chinese, I think it was in the sophomore year at school, in college, and I said, Mom and Dad, I realize who I am now. I want to speak Chinese at home now, and I want to practice my Chinese. And my parents said, no, we want to practice our English, so you're going to have to speak English at home now. But anyway, throughout the college years, I'd say most of my friends were Asian Americans, but I also wanted to go ahead and participate in other activities where I got to know people with diverse backgrounds and perspectives. So I got involved in student government. I got involved in community outreach programs, as well as continuing to play baseball in college. But then that sort of affected the way I actually approached looking for my first job after college. I wanted to work in the community. I wanted to work with folks who were disadvantaged. And so I interviewed, and I actually had some offers to go to New York to work for banks at that time. But I said, no, I really want to pursue certain activities that got me closer to the community. And so I actually interviewed for a job that was sponsored by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston at that time. It was a community outreach program to teach black and white students in the Boston community how to operate their own small business. And so for some of you who have been to Boston, I actually taught business principles in South Boston High School, and then we ran a pushcart operation at Faneuil Hall Marketplace. And so it was very interesting because when I interviewed, and this is sort of a point that I would like to make throughout this talk, is sometimes you got to be in the right place at the right time and take advantage of the opportunities presented to you. And so I was talking to the director of urban affairs at the Federal Reserve Bank when he was interviewing me for this position, and started talking about my background, and he said, okay, you've got the job. This was after 15 minutes. He said, you got the job. And I said, wait a minute, you really don't know much about me. Is it because of my resume? Is it because of the school I went to? Is it because I'm so articulate in terms of describing my passions for this position? He goes, no, 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 no. He said, this program, and this was in the middle of this busing controversy in Boston, where, you know, black students were being bused into a lower income white community school, and they were being thrown, you know, buses were the recipient of rocks all over the place when they would be bused into the school. And the director said, no, this position is supposed to be to work with black and white students, to get them together, to work together, because in the school environment, they can't really learn, but we want to bring black and white students together to learn business and take them out of the school and really understand each other. You're not black, you're not white. You're right in the middle, and so you're perfect for the job. So I said, okay, being in the right place at the right time. But it really taught me to sort of appreciate the perspectives of folks in a lower economic class, and therefore I was able to go ahead and chalk that up in terms of my sort of experience. And so on to the next stage of my career. This job was actually to institutionalize this program within the public school system in South Boston High, so I knew that this job was 2 years, and then what do I do next? And then I ended up deciding, well, gee, I'm teaching these kids how to run their own business. I better be more legitimate myself, so I'm going to go to business school. And so I ended up going to business school, ended up going to work for 2 years with the Morgan Bank in New York. And then I said, you know, I'm still interested in law. I had applied to law school and business schools at the same time. And so when I was thinking about going to law school, I said, gee, you know, do I have to go through all this application process again? And so I went to all the law schools that I got accepted to, and the only one that said you don't have to go through the entire application process was UC Berkeley, Bolt Hall School of Law. They said, just go ahead, write a page of what you've been doing in the last couple of years since you know, you applied, and unless you killed somebody, you're in. And so that's how I ended up coming to the West Coast. And so I practiced law for a number of years in a private practice, and then I had a great opportunity. A friend of mine who was actually working at Acer at that time and said, would you like to come in-house, because we're really starting the legal department, and this would be a great opportunity because it's a fast-growing business, and you would be responsible for all the corporate transactions, setting up offices all over the world, doing joint ventures in different continents, and I thought this was a wonderful opportunity. But I made sure that the people at the law firm, I said, gee, if it doesn't work out, can I come back? They said, yeah. So, okay. So in that sense, you know, have a backup plan if you have it. So I started working for Acer, and then soon was able to get up to the position of general counsel. But you also need to kind of look at the work situation, because I look back and it's probably been the most transformative job that I had in my life, because I was working for a phenomenal founder, chairman, and CEO, a guy named Stan Shi, who was a local, Taiwan entrepreneur, never went abroad for schooling, and taught himself English and ran a company that ultimately multi-billion-dollar in revenue, and also ended up being, I think, #1 in the notebook business at one point in time. He was a very humble individual, someone who was self-assured, a visionary, who was kind and supportive. And so I think within a couple of years being in the job, he said, I wonder if you can take on the responsibility of being general counsel for Acer. And I was kind of intimidated at that time, because I said, I don't think I have the experience. I know that, I'll come into new situations where I'll make mistakes. And, he said, I don't mind people who make mistakes. You learn from your mistakes. But please, if you accept, don't make too many mistakes. So I said, okay, I'll try. And so I got more and more involved in sort of the business negotiations, and so started shifting toward more business, even though I retained the title of general counsel. And then in 97, 98 timeframe, Stan said, I hear there's this thing called venture capital in the US, and we've got to start figuring out how to expand into businesses that have higher margins than selling PCs. So I said, okay. And he actually chose my partner and my partner being a phenomenal individual by the name of Ronald Chuang, to start the venture business for Acer. Acer dedicated $40 million to invest in enabling technologies in the U.S. And so at that time, this is another sort of, lesson, is whatever job you have, try to do the best you can in that job. People will identify your capabilities and the ability to move into another area, even though, you don't have necessarily the experience. And so he chose my partner Ronald, because Ronald was the head of the U.S. operations. He took sales of Acer from 300 million to 1.2 billion or something like that within a matter of several years. And Ronald had the deep technology background. I had the sort of transactional experience, and so our sort of strengths were well matched. And so we started investing, and we were one of the first investors in a company called iRobot that made the Roomba. We were an early investor in another MIT spin-off company called Harmonix Music that was the creators of Guitar Hero and Rock Band. And so, at that time, you can't say that we knew everything about venture. We were both venture capitalists for the first time. But this is another sort of thing to take note, is you got to have good timing and you have to have a lot of luck. And so we got in around 98, which from a venture capital vintage year was a very good year, because that was when all the companies were being sold quickly and made big returns for companies. But then also, we went through the 2000 bust. And so basically, moving to sort of my current job, because we ended up investing in a lot of companies in the US and in China. And so Acer Ventures was kind of winding down and scaling down, actually, in sort of 2000. And so I transitioned to another venture firm, W.I. Harper. And at W.I. Harper, after a couple of months there, I was expecting to do technology investing with W.I. Harper, but our chairman came to me and said, the head of our healthcare practice is moving on to OrbiMed, which is a huge healthcare PE venture and hedge fund focused on biotech. and would you like to help manage our team, our healthcare team? And he said, we need some gray hair to kind of guide these folks. I said, I don't know anything about healthcare, but I have some gray hair, so I think I can try doing this. And so I think another thing to take note is, always be open to try something new. We had a really good team on the ground, both in Beijing and in San Francisco. This was an area that I thought was very impactful. I felt that, finding new drugs, being able to come up with medical devices to save lives was something that's very, very important. And in fact, just the other day, Liming was talking about his son that had autism. We were evaluating a project coming out of Mike Snyder's lab that actually, through genetic sort of testing, you can predict autism at a very early age, and also predict the onset of epilepsy. So we haven't decided to invest in it, but we're doing due diligence. So my thinking is that, always be prepared to take on new challenges. And so I look back in my life and I think I'm a very fortunate person. I've had a very fulfilling life, but I'm not ready to slow down as long as I can work with entrepreneurs with new ideas and also help build companies that can make an impact on society. I look forward to new challenges, so appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, what life lessons. And we are all here at right time, right place to learn so many great stories, aren't we?